My nephew called me from school on a Thursday, and I could tell from the first syllable that something had happened. He's 8, his name is Marcus, and he has his father's ears, my sister's stubbornness, and a laugh that arrives about 3 seconds after everyone else's, because he thinks things through before he decides they're funny. I have been his favorite aunt since he was 4, which I know because he told me, unprompted, at a family dinner. His mother pointed out that I'm his only aunt. He said that wasn't the point. He called to tell me about a kid at school, not a friend. The opposite of a friend, delivered in the careful language of a child who has been taught to avoid the word bully, because the adults in his life believe in the power of neutral framing. This kid, whose name Marcus delivered with a specific flatness, had been making lunch difficult, had been saying things about his shoes, had that morning told him in front of several people that he was weird. Marcus said this last part quietly, which told me it had landed. I asked what he'd done. He said nothing. He said his teacher said to ignore it and eventually the kid would stop. I said, has he stopped? Marcus said, no. I said, how long has this been happening? He said, 3 weeks. I sat with that for a moment. 3 weeks of being called weird every day by someone who had correctly identified that the word would stick. 3 weeks of ignoring it as instructed while it continued. I said, can I tell you something my grandmother told me when I was about your age? He said, okay. I said, she told me that ignoring a bully only works if the bully is doing it for a reaction. Some of them are, but some of them are doing it because it makes them feel like the biggest person in the room, and ignoring them doesn't shrink them. It just leaves the room the same size. He was quiet. I said, for those ones, you have to change the size of the room. He said, how? I said, you make them confused instead of powerful. You don't attack, you just refuse to be attacked. There's a difference. We spent 40 minutes on the phone, and by the end of it, Marcus had a small arsenal of the most boring and effective tools I know. The confused face, the raised eyebrow that says I'm not sure why you think that's interesting, the simple redirect that acknowledges nothing and engages with nothing and removes all the oxygen from the situation. I told him the goal was never to hurt. The goal was to end the conversation. There's a difference, and it matters. He said he understood. He called me the following Thursday. He said the kid had tried again at lunch, and he'd done the face, and then just turned away, and the kid had stood there for a second and then left. I said, how did it feel? He said, good. He said, weird but good. I said that was exactly how it was supposed to feel. Then he said, I found out his parents are getting divorced. Like really bad divorced. My friend said they fight at pickup. I said, that's hard for a kid. He said, I know. I sat with him at lunch yesterday. I stayed quiet for a second because I needed a second. I said, that was a kind thing to do. He said, he didn't really talk much, but he ate his lunch and didn't say anything mean. I think he was okay with it. I said, I think you're right. He said, Aunt Claire, do you think being weird is bad? I said, no. I said, the people who call other people weird are usually trying to name something they can't reach yet. And he thought about that for a moment in his way. The 3-second delay before deciding. Then he said, that's a weird thing to say. Then he laughed. I've been his favorite aunt since he was 4, and I'm his only aunt, and he's right that that's not the point. The point is that he called me. The point is that he sat down at that lunch table. The point is that he's going to be fine. And not because nothing hard will ever happen to him, but because he already knows the difference between ending a conversation and winning one. But he learned that on a Thursday. I'm keeping that Thursday.